Hello everyone, and welcome to the installation and setup lecture for macOS users. So it's time to get set up for the course. In this lecture video, we're going to be installing two main things. One is PostgreSQL, which is the actual SQL engine that stores the data, has the database, reads in queries, and returns back information from that database. The second thing we're going to be installing and setting up is PgAdmin. PgAdmin is the graphical user interface that we will use in order to connect with the backend of PostgreSQL. Now, there's a couple things to note here. First thing to note is please make sure to follow each step in order very carefully. If you do these steps out of order or mess a certain part of each step up, then you may have to go back and restart from the very beginning. There's two really common confusion points. One is later on we're going to download a file called dvdrental.tar file. Do not open that tar file directly. We'll show you how to deal with it later on. And also, later on we're going to set up a password for both PostgreSQL and PgAdmin. Make sure you do not forget that password and make sure you write it down somewhere. Okay, so to help avoid any missteps, we've gone ahead and numbered the major steps and we'll present them right now in the correct order. So let's get started with step number one, which is to download and install PostgreSQL. For step number one, I'm going to head over to the Google Chrome browser and then go to google.com. Okay, here I am at google.com. Go ahead and search for PostgreSQL in Google. Just hit Google search. And the first thing you should see after advertisements is the official website, which is postgresql.org. And then click on this official site for PostgreSQL. And it should look something like this. Keep in mind, this page does get updated from time to time, but this is where we're going to be downloading PostgreSQL. And somewhere on this page, you should see a download button. It'll either just be really obvious here and download or appear at the top. So go ahead and click download. That will take you to the core distribution page and you'll see the different packages. There's the Linux packages, the Windows packages, etc. But right now we're focusing on macOS. Since I'm on a Mac right now, I'll click on macOS and then you'll see here there's different options for the macOS packages and then there's also different versions for platform support. So depending on what version of the 64-bit macOS platform you have, you may actually need to download a lower version of PostgreSQL. So make sure that you actually check that your macOS platform is going to correspond to whatever version of PostgreSQL you have. So again, older Macs will need to go with older PostgreSQLs. Okay, so in general, I'm just going to use the latest one since I'm on macOS Catalina. And I'm going to click right here where it says Interactive Installer by Enterprise DB. I'll click on Download the Installer. And this will take me to the Enterprise DB download page. And here we can see for macOS, go ahead and choose the corresponding PostgreSQL version. You can check on the last page to see what version of macOS corresponds to which version of PostgreSQL it supports. I'm on the latest version of macOS, so right now the latest version of PostgreSQL supports that. I'll go ahead and click download here under macOS 10. And then go ahead and let it download. It should download this zip file somewhere onto your computer. And then I'll go ahead and save it underneath my downloads folder. So go ahead and click save. And then it's going to download that zip file for us. Okay, I'm going to fast forward in time until this is done downloading. Okay, this has now finished installing. So what I'm going to do here is, if you see it in Finder, we have this zip file. I'm going to go ahead and just open it with the default archive utility. That will unzip this right here underneath downloads. And you'll see here that I now have this PostgreSQL OS X. Go ahead and double click on that. And then you may get this notification saying it's an app downloaded from the internet. Are you sure you want to open it? Go ahead and click open. For some people, they have their macOS settings that says it doesn't allow them to open unidentified developers or unidentified applications. You'll have to go to your settings and change that. And if you just Google search the actual terms that macOS returns to you about opening stuff from unidentified developers, it'll show you how to open that very easily through a Google search. But in my case, it's just asking me if I want to open it. Go ahead and select open. It may ask you for your password. Go ahead and provide it. And the installer should begin. So here's the setup wizard. I'm just going to hit next here. Go ahead and choose the default directory. And then you'll notice there's some components here that it's going to install. Go ahead and just select them all. Have all the defaults selected, hit next. Go ahead and select the default for the data directory of where it's going to save our data. And this is the extremely important part. There's a password here that you need to provide. And if you ever forget this password, you'll need to essentially uninstall everything and reinstall from the beginning. So I highly recommend that you put in a password here that you know you're going to remember. So what I like to do is I just like to type in password in all lowercase. So we'll say password. Since this is on our own computer, we don't need to worry about any sort of security issue with this. So I'm just typing password in all lowercase. Again, you must remember this password. If you decide to do something more complicated, make sure you write down this password somewhere else, because if you forget this password, there's really nothing I can do for you on my end. You'll need to uninstall and reinstall everything. So this is a very important step where you must remember this password. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit next. All right, the next thing you're going to do is select a port number the server should be listening on. Depending if you've already installed PostgreSQL before or not, you may see a different port number here than what I have. Currently, I have 5433. It's really common that it shows up as 5432. But whatever the default value is here, go ahead and just leave it be. So my default right now is on 5433, which essentially means that port is open and the server can listen on it. It's essentially going to be the connection of where PostgreSQL is going to live. And keep in mind that if you have a corporate firewall, you want to make sure that's not blocking this sort of port. So later on when you're running PgAdmin, if you see that your firewall is blocking that port, go ahead and allow your firewall to connect with PostgreSQL and this particular port number. So it provided me a 5433. If it provides you with a higher number or a lower number, that's totally okay. Just select the default, hit next, and then select the default location for the new database cluster, hit next, and then it'll say pre-installation summary, that's okay too, hit next. Setup is now ready to begin, hit next, and let it install onto your computer. I'm going to fast forward until this is done installing. Okay, that has finished installing for me. Keep in mind, if you're running an older version of macOS, or you have a much older MacBook that you updated to the latest version of macOS, you sometimes get an error that says something like database cluster initialization couldn't be done or could not be found, etc. If you get an error at that particular step between hitting install and then actually finishing the wizard, it most likely means that you need to downgrade to a lower version of PostgreSQL. So if you get an error saying something about the database cluster initialization not being set up correctly, go ahead and try a much lower version of PostgreSQL, like 9.7 or something like 10. So don't go for the latest one. Okay, in my case, it looks like everything went well. It's going to ask you if you want to launch Stack Builder at exit. We don't need to do that, so go ahead and unclick that, and then just hit finish. Okay. And now we've taken care of step 1, which was installing PostgreSQL. It's time to move on to step 2. Step 2 is to download and install PgAdmin. PgAdmin is the graphical user interface that we'll be using to connect with PostgreSQL. And what's really interesting about the latest version of PgAdmin is that it actually opens up in your browser. Let's go ahead and show you how to download it. To do this, we'll go to our browser. Okay, here I am at the browser. What you're going to go ahead and do is just input PgAdmin. Go ahead and Google search. And after the advertisements, the first thing you should see is www.pgadmin.org. So that's the official website for PgAdmin. Go ahead and click on it. And this is an open source, free, and it's the most popular way to work with PostgreSQL. And what we're going to do here is somewhere here you should be able to see that there's a download button. There's also an interesting online demo if you want to check it out, so you can kind of quickly see what's going on online without downloading anything. But go ahead and go to download. We'll go to PgAdmin, and the latest version is PgAdmin 4. If you're running a really old version of macOS, you may need to run PgAdmin 3. It will warn you that it's actually no longer supported, but that basically means that they're not supporting PgAdmin with the latest versions of PostgreSQL. That's okay if you're running an older version of macOS. You can go ahead and just click on macOS under PgAdmin 3. I'm running the latest version of macOS, so I will go ahead and select macOS under PgAdmin 4. That will take me to the downloads here. You can see that there's various versions of PgAdmin 4. They keep updating it with more features or better workings under the hood. I'll go ahead and just select the newest version, which in my case was 4.18. You'll see here that it'll take you to kind of this interesting file browser directory. There's different files here. Really what we're looking for is just this .dmg file, which is the typical installer for any application on a macOS. You'll notice that it's by far the largest file. So that's actually the only one we need here is the largest file, which is the .dmg file. Go ahead and click on it. And upon clicking on it, what we're going to do is we're going to save this to our downloads folder. So I will save that to downloads, and that's going to download that .dmg file. Going to fast forward in time until this is done downloading it, and then we'll walk through the installation. Okay, this DMG file has finished downloading it. I'll go ahead and open it. So this is essentially running the installer, and we'll go ahead and agree to the terms. And then it's going to open the .dmg file. It'll verify this. This may take a couple of seconds. And then you should see a little window that looks something like this, PgAdmin 4. And right now what this has done is it has PgAdmin 4 ready to go. But what we need to do is to make sure this is saved on our computer and we don't accidentally start reinstalling it every time to open it. We need to save this and move this to our applications. So what you need to do is in your Finder window, go ahead and look for your applications folder. You can come here to applications, click on that. So here we have our applications folder. This should actually be under favorites by default. It's essentially where all your applications live. And if you notice here and start scrolling down to P, you have PostgreSQL available for you, but you don't yet have PgAdmin 4. So what we need to do is simply grab PgAdmin 4 and drag it and move it to applications. Okay, and what that is going to do is that will finish the entire installation process. Otherwise, you would accidentally be reinstalling PgAdmin each time you actually wanted to open it. Okay, so that's it for installing PgAdmin 4, is following through that .dmg procedure and then making sure that you actually copy the PgAdmin 4 and move it over to your applications. All right, so once that has moved over to the applications, you can go ahead and close this initial window. It's quite a large file, so keep that in mind. I'm going to fast forward in time until this is done copying over. Okay, now that has finished being transferred over to under Applications. If you don't see it under Applications after you transfer over to it, you may need to click on Desktop and then come back to Applications in order to see the actual change occur inside of your little Finder window. So right here, we see PgAdmin 4. And if you go back to your desktop, you now no longer have to worry about this little temporary drive that's open. You'll notice there's PgAdmin 4 here on your desktop. Go ahead and you can just eject that, and that will remove it from your computer. However, it's safe to say that it still exists on your computer now under Applications. All right, and that concludes step number 2. Step 3 is to download, but not directly open, the dvdrental.tar file. As a resource in this installation lecture, you should see a dvdrental.tar file as a resource to download. What we're going to do is download this file, but do not attempt to unzip the file, double-click on the file, or open the file, or interact with the file in any manner. It's only meant to be interacted with directly through PgAdmin. So please do not directly open or interact with the file. Sometimes computers think it's a PDF file or it's a zip file that needs to be unzipped. You do not need to worry about any of that. All we're doing for this step is downloading it. So let's show you how to do that. If you take a quick look at Udemy's support page on course taking, there's an entire article lecture devoted to downloading supplemental resources. Keep in mind this may change in future versions of Udemy, but right now the current way you download them is there's a little icon underneath the lecture called Resources that you just click on, and then it'll have a drop-down menu of the different resources to download. So what's going to happen is as you're watching the actual installation lecture, you'll be at Complete SQL Bootcamp. You'll come over here, and then over here somewhere on the right of this particular lecture, you'll hit Resources, and then you'll see this dvdrental.tar file. You'll go ahead and click on that, and you'll save it, and make sure to save it underneath your downloads. You must remember where this is saved. So go ahead and save that to your downloads, and that's all we're going to do for this step. Do not attempt to double-click on this file or open this file or unzip this file. That will cause an error for the rest of the installation process. So once you've downloaded it, that's it, and that's all you need to do for that. Okay, let's move on to the next step. All right, step number 4 is to restart your computer. In order to make sure your computer has attributed all the changes necessary for PostgreSQL and PgAdmin, it's common that we need to restart your computer. So go ahead and just restart your computer, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, step number 5 is essentially the last step where we're going to be restoring the database. Keep in mind, there may be a failed execode that appears, and you can safely ignore it. In some particular versions of PostgreSQL, along with some particular versions of macOS, you get a failed execode that pops up because the database attempts to restore itself twice. And what happens is it works fine on the first time, and then it gets an error the second time because it works successfully the first time. So if you get that failed execode, it's totally safe to ignore it. So we'll go ahead and try our best to show you how to ignore that execode. But again, if you get a failed execode 1, you can safely ignore that execode. In order to restore the database, we'll need to start up PgAdmin. So let's do that. To start up PgAdmin, all you need to do is search for PgAdmin, and it should autocomplete with PgAdmin 4 underneath your applications. Go ahead and open that. So we'll double click on that, and what's going to happen is it's going to start up PgAdmin for us. It'll verify it. You may get this warning saying it's downloaded from the internet. Are you sure you want to open it? Go ahead and say open. If it does not allow you to open it from the internet, go ahead and just change your settings to allow you to open things from unidentified developers. If you're not sure how to do that, you can just Google search the actual message that pops up, and there's pretty much tons of tutorials online that teach you how to just go to your settings and edit it so you can open that up. Okay, so I'll go ahead and open it. You'll see this little icon appear, PgAdmin Management Tools, and this may take a few minutes, especially the first time it's ever opening it. But what's going to happen is eventually it's going to open up in your browser. And we'll go ahead and allow notifications from PgAdmin. So I'm going to forward in time until this is done. Oh, there we go. So it's already running, and it's going to open up in your browser. And what it's going to ask you is to set the master password for PgAdmin. Keep in mind, this is technically a different password than the PostgreSQL user password. This is just for PgAdmin. However, I would highly recommend that you set this to something either the same as Postgres or just something you can really remember. In my case, I'll keep it simple and just set this as password. And be careful when you're spelling this because there is no confirmed password, which is kind of a design flaw here. But just go ahead and I'm going to choose lowercase password. Make sure you write this down somewhere. Hit OK. And then you should see something that looks like this. So we have PgAdmin 4. It's running in our browser. You can always copy and paste this URL if you want to use a different internet browser. It'll open up in your default one. Underneath servers, if you expand on this, what you should see is PostgreSQL 12. Now, if you've already installed older versions of PostgreSQL on your computer, you may actually see those pop up. In my case, I actually installed 9.5 earlier, so I see that pop up. But you should see PostgreSQL 12 here. If you don't see it, make sure you've already restarted your computer. And then expand this again. And when you're trying to expand it, it's going to ask you to enter the password for Postgres. That's the same password that was set up during the first initial installation of PostgreSQL. That's why it's so important that you remember what that password is. In my case, I just kept it all lowercase password. So that should be good to go. Go ahead and select Save Password. Again, if you do not remember the Postgres password, there's really nothing I can do for you here. You'll need to start over since the very beginning. Okay, then hit OK. That should work since that was the correct password. And now we can see a bunch of information about the dashboard, etc. What we're going to do here is just restore our database. So to do this, I'm going to first create, underneath databases, a new database. I can see there's one that already exists called Postgres. I'm going to right click here and hit create and then database. And we're going to call this database DVD rental. So call the database DVD rental and then go ahead and hit save. The owner should be by default Postgres. Hit save, and now you'll see you have this new DVD rental database that we're not yet connected to. If you click on it, you should see it get colored in, and now we're connected to it. And now it's time to actually put the information into this database by restoring from that dvdrental.tar file. So I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to go down to where it says restore. Click on restore. So what we need to do is we need to tell PgAdmin where our dvdrental.tar file is actually located. So we need to find the file name. So most people are going to be able to click on these 3 points here and then actually search their computer for it. However, for some users, especially on macOS Catalina, there's been some issues lately of just stuff being locked or not being able to actually find the file itself. So here, maybe you can search on under applications, double click on that, and then keep going forward. But what I'm going to do is show you the fail-proof way, which is just to manually provide the file name. And I prefer this way anyways. So what we're going to do is we're going to remember that we saved that dvdrental.tar file underneath downloads. So open up your downloads folder, and you should see dvdrental.tar. So we know it's located under downloads. All I want to do is grab the complete file path. So I'll right click on dvdrental.tar. Again, that's a right click, and then select Get Info. And here I can see where, and it's going to tell me it's under Macintosh HD, users, and in my particular username is Marcy here, and then downloads. So what I'll do is I'll highlight that entirety of where, right click, hit copy, then come back here to restore, and then select paste. So notice now it gives me the file path users, Marcy, downloads. Then we'll complete this by saying /dvdrental.tar. And that's going to be the complete file path telling PgAdmin, go look at this location and look at this file. The next thing we need to do before we hit restore is go to restore options and select pre-data, data, and post-data. And then come back to general, and then we're ready to go. Hit restore, and it will attempt to restore this. It'll ask you, would you like to access your downloads folder? Go ahead and allow it to. Once you hit OK here, and that should actually complete the restoration process. Keep in mind that you may actually see this failed Xcode 1 pop up. It's totally okay if you see that. You can go ahead and ignore that. It just means that it attempted to restore it twice, which is totally okay. So go ahead and exit this. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to say on DVD rental, right click and refresh in order to have those changes take place. And now let's attempt our first query on this DVD rental database. We're going to right click and select Query Tool. And Query Tool is essentially where we spend the rest of the course. This is where we actually learn and type out SQL. So we're going to type out select space asterisk space from space film semicolon. And then we'll go ahead and run this. And upon running that, you should see here under data output just some film IDs, titles, descriptions, etc. And now you successfully restored the database and you queried it for more information. And we'll talk about what this actually means later on in the course, but this is just the general query editor. Okay, if you get some sort of error saying film not recognized or not found, make sure that you follow the steps exactly. So you may have to go back and restart your computer. Or what you could also do is try using a lower version of PostgreSQL if that error keeps coming back, because most likely what's happening is that your particular version of macOS wasn't suitable for the most recent version of PostgreSQL. Okay, if you're able to run this query and see these results, then you're ready to go. I'll see you in the next lecture.